I think we can start this morning a bit earlier because our Olcott School children came earlier here and had their fantastic presentation. So let's start with the universal prayer. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Be seated. Welcome everyone to this Adyar Day. There are a few reasons why we celebrate Adyar Day on the 17th November each year. The first reason is that on that day, 17th November, the first president of the Theosophical Society, Henry Steele Olcott, passed away. The year was 1907. The second reason is that the Italian philosopher, occultist, and astronomer Giordano Bruno, who was a former reincarnation of Annie Besant, was burnt at stake due to his advanced opinions, and this happened in 1600s. The third reason is that Charles W. Leadbeater has born on 17th February. The year was 1854. And the fourth reason, which is around 17th February, is that Jiddu Krishnamurti died on 17th February, and the year was 1986. So a few happenings took place on this special day. This day we remember and give thanks to those who walked before us, who dedicated their lives to theosophy, and who gave us the very special gift of Adyar. Now the Adyar Choir will sing two songs, Adyar Song and New Era of Adyar. So I have a special task to introduce our speaker, Emeritus Professor Baden Offord from Australia. When I searched his biography, this task became quite challenging because his contribution to human areas is so extremely wide. From a lighter side, I can tell that I met him and his friends who are also here, welcome, from Australia, and his mother in 1980s in Sweden, and then in the Netherlands, the International Theosophical Center, where Rada Bernier conducted a seminar on human regeneration. It is great to meet after many decades to realize the flow of lives. As comes to the TS at Adyar, Baden has worked here for over 3 years in 1980s with his friends. Baden Offord is a writer, teacher, scholar, and activist who was born in Aotearoa, New Zealand of Maori and Paketha heritage. His family migrated to Australia in 1981. He is a recipient of several national teaching awards. He was appointed the Officer of the Order of Australia for distinguished service to tertiary education in the field of human rights, social justice, and cultural diversity. Currently, he is Emeritus Professor of Cultural Studies and Human Rights at Curtin University in Australia. He has been professor and visiting scholar in many universities, like Tokyo, Barcelona, Indiana, Auckland. He has produced over 160 publications, conference papers, and presentations. His short essay called Overland is about becoming human, lived experience, suicide, and the complexities of being. Human rights education has been his major field, and today his talk is about Adyar Intangible heritage. So, welcome. Oh, yeah.
So, friends, sisters, and brothers, fellow Theosophists, Marja, thank you very much for that very kind and generous welcome. It's so interesting when Marja did this introduction because we did meet a long time ago, and in many ways that encapsulates, I think, the meaning of Adyar Day and the intangible reality of marvelous friendships and conviviality that in so many ways are embodied in this place, this very beautiful place that we know, the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society here at Adyar. So I think in many ways that idea of bringing together that intangible nature of friendship over time and coming to this place, that tangible moment of being here in Adyar is a kind of proof of that evidence of what happens through duration as members of the Theosophical Society. I also want to say that before I begin talking a little bit about Adyar and its intangible heritage and I want to go into that a little bit. I think the song that we just heard, both songs, very much embody that sense of what I really want to reflect on this morning, which is that extraordinary, it's not mere sentiment, it is in fact quite a serious love, a serious affection for this place, for Adyar. Adyar has been talked about as the home of the masters, and this song that was sung so beautifully captures that spirit. Adyar, known as the flaming centre, or as the centre, the heart of the theosophical world. All of these things are very much about this notion of what is intangible. You know, it's something that comes about through connection, through shared experience, shared lived experience, but also through the kinds of stories that we tell each other. And in fact, one of the things about thinking about Adyar and its intangible heritage is something that I think can be really thought about through story. We as human beings are storytellers. That is who we are in so many ways. Would you agree? We are storytellers. And the stories we tell ourselves, about ourselves, for those who are coming in the future, those to tell stories about those in the past, to tell stories about what is happening in the present. And we know at the moment there are so many stories. In New Zealand, when we say there are many stories that are disturbed, we talk about the bees. The bees are busy. They've been disturbed. You know, they're making the honey, but they are disturbed by something. And so there are many stories happening at the moment, of course, in the world, because we face so many difficult challenges, so many extraordinary cruelties and many examples of inhumanity. So what do I mean by intangible heritage? What do we mean by that? Well, I think as theosophists, we would probably understand that very quickly. In the wider world, you may know UNESCO has a whole approach to preserving, to supporting, to sustaining places that are significant. Places, but not just places, practices. Practices such as singing songs, practices like dance, practices like telling stories or sharing stories. There's a whole thing about the intangible nature of cultural heritage. That is, that there are unique things about each place, each society, each person, and so on. And we can see this so much in the world around us. But if we introduce the idea that, in fact, there is a more deeper notion, which is intangible living heritage, then we have to start to think about what it means, for example, here on Adyar Day, which is basically a celebration, a reminder, a reflection of all of those remarkable theosophists, seekers of wisdom, who have worked for the Theosophical Society over so many years, who established this place, Colonel Olcott, HPB, you know, the duration of the most remarkable, one of the most remarkable women, I think, to have existed, Annie Besant, Dr. Annie Besant, and all of the other presidents combined and all of the members who come here. there's this idea, of course, that when we think about what is intangible, it's not something that you can, easily touch. You can't touch it. It's not tangible. But there's an essential relationship between the intangible and the tangible. But what's important, I think, when we think about this as theosophists, and I think we know this, is that unless we value the intangible heritage, the tangible will not be safe. That the tangible will not endure. Because in fact, it is the practices, it is the acts of love, the acts of service, the acts of being together, of coexisting through, meetings and sharing stories and learning about another life, for example, lived in the far north parts of, western United States, or of meeting someone from Sweden here, or coming back to this remarkable place which, in the world, Tamil Nadu, is one of the most culturally rich places that we can think of. So there's this fundamental relationship between what is intangible, what we can't, touch it. It's not tactile in that sense. So it moves us. The intangible moves us. And this is one of the remarkable things about the Theosophical Society, is that it has been one of probably the most significant organisation to have, in a way, brought about this movement of understanding the intangible from a very broad, a very global perspective. That was a revolution. The Theosophical Society was itself a very radical, a very revolutionary organisation. So when we say intangible living heritage, I think what it means for us is that Adyar Day represents a moment to pause and consider and to have gratitude, to thank those who have come before us and built this extraordinary organisation to be able to disseminate these remarkable ideas of unity and diversity, of a remarkable, marvellous kind of friendship built on these sort of idea of seeking wisdom together, of listening to each other, even though we may have different views and different experiences and so on. So this idea of Adyar as intangible living heritage is a very significant thought, because here you have established, the Theosophical Society is established, embodied, made tangible, like the museum, for example, here, with beautiful paintings by Nicholas Roerich, if you know, or this beautiful hall with representations and honouring all the different religions of the world. That these things are what, in a sense, bind us together in search of truth, in search of understanding. And that is an intangible connection that is about life. One of our former presidents, N. Sri Ram, who when I came across theosophical work, I found the most illuminating thinker, beautiful writer, with an extraordinary capacity for insight. He says this very simple thing in one of his books. I don't remember which one. It could be Seeking Wisdom, it could be one of the many other ones, The Nature of Our Seeking. But he says very simply, and it's almost like what I would call a theosophical Zen koan. Do you know what I mean by that? So a Zen koan means something that when you listen to the words, you go, it kind of makes you take a double step back and think, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? And in Sri Ram, so thinking about intangible living heritage, En Sri Ram says that life, quote, life is the purpose of itself. Life is the purpose of itself. I think myself that nothing can be more beautiful, more arresting than that particular thought. Because it's not something you can debate with or have some kind of intellectual argument. It's an intangible insight. It is saying to us, and I think this is what Adyar, when we think about Adyar each year, I always think of that statement, that life is the purpose of itself, that all of us, that this extraordinary organisation, this theosophical movement, this theosophical society is the embodiment of understanding life, of bringing life, of expanding life, of honouring life in so many forms. And this song, for example, that you sang, the Adyar Choir, I think? No? It's the Adyar Choir? It embodies this idea of life is the purpose of itself. I can't think of anything more remarkable. So when we think about the intangible living heritage, it's not just thinking about the past. It's thinking about now and what is happening now in the present. What are the conditions of life now? Because the conditions of life have changed and the conditions of life in the future will be different. So what is the potential for Adyar, for the society into the future? How will it discuss coexistence between human beings and between ourselves and nature, the environment, which needs us so badly? Nature, the environment we know, needs human beings shepherding, becoming participants in its life. And Adyar is one of those examples where you can see just here on this beautiful ashram, this campus, how you have coexistence between the tangible, that is honouring the past, the museum, the archives, the library, books, the convention, and so on. But it also includes this idea of sharing stories about life. And this is what I wanted to now turn to a little bit. So that idea of intangible lived, intangible living heritage is something I think could be a very important direction for us to think about in the future for the Theosophical Society. So I just want to say, what is an example? Again, songs, dance, art, all of these things meditation are examples of intangibility. You know, what is intangible? What moves us? What brings the spiritual into life? What activates us? Makes us tremendously sensitive, alert and attentive to what is, and being alive, basically. What is it that I think binds this sort of thing together? So my very simple example this morning, as I said before, is the idea of storytelling. So as Marja said, and so I want to share some stories. And I think everybody here in this room, obviously, we are all human beings. We all have stories to share, stories to tell. It just happens that I'm privileged to be here, and I'm very honoured to be able to share some stories with you about Adyar on this very special occasion. Because when you go home and you're having your supper this evening or about to go to sleep, I would like you to just reflect on this gathering this morning and the beautiful song, and to remember the idea that storytelling is so crucial to our being alive. It means we're alive. And I think the Theosophical Society, as long as it has that ability to share stories about who we are as human beings, about what's happening in the world, it will be a very vibrant, very vital organisation. I know if you read the Adyar newsletter, Geetha produces from, leaves from the archives or from various stories about the estate and the history. It brings this living thing into us about this place, which it's extraordinary, it's a gift. So I was very fortunate I actually migrated to Australia in 1961, by the way, not 1981, but in 1979 was the first time I came to Adyar. And I think I say that because the last time I was in Adyar was in 2013 to see Radhaji. And so that's a duration of a long period of time of being associated with Adyar. And there are some stories that I think, for me, really are evocative. They're intangible moments of being in Adyar, and all of you have this kind of thing. So one is this. The first time that I came here, I was staying in Bojanzala, New Quadrangle, if you know New Quadrangle up the road there. And I was in the room, and we had a mosquito netting on the window, but there was a hole in the window, in the mosquito netting. So, with my very meagre money, because I was 20 years old, 21 I think, and I was a student, so I didn't have much money. I was lucky to come here. We had bought a book by Krishnamurti, Chiddu Krishnamurti, called On Education. And so, to stop the mosquitoes, we thought, a very practical thing. We'll put the book over the hole to stop the mosquitoes from coming in the evening. Well, Marja, it did not work. Because what happened that night, a monkey came and took that book. So that book has gone. And it was on education, and we never saw it again. So that is one of my first memories of coming to Adyar. This intangible moment, which for an Australian, coming to a place where there are monkeys, for one thing, was a stunning thing to encounter. The second story is when I was working in the archives. I had the great privilege of working in the archives, which was just here, the office, when I was here in Adyar, between 1986 and 1989. And there's a beautiful desk there, which I think is Colonel Olcott's. It was his desk. It's a beautiful roller desk. Yeah. And I still remember this so vividly because I was only in my 20s. I was about 26 at this time, I think 26, 27. So imagine, the wonder of being in Adyar at that age is just fantastic. So I encourage everybody to come here in their 20s. Although everyone said it would be good for your career, I actually say no, it was very good for my career. All my things, all the stuff I've done has come from the days that I spent here. This was the soil in which I learnt what it means to be a human being, which is really the purpose of the Theosophical movement. What are we? Who are we? What do we embody? So, I'm in the archives one day, and I put the roller up. It's a beautiful desk. If you want to see it sometime, it's just in there. And I put my hand, I don't know why, I put my hand under the desk, and I was feeling around, and suddenly I felt some paper, a little piece of paper, and stuck under the desk was this letter. So I got this letter, and I look at this letter, and I see it's in very scratchy writing, and it says, "Dear Annie," like very familiar, "Dear Annie," and it says something about, I'm paraphrasing, it must be still in the archives because we put it in a proper folder, I'm not sure. And it said, "Dear Annie, life in prison is going okay." Well, not okay, but he talks about life in prison and what's happening with the Congress, what's going on with the political situation and so on. And so down the bottom, It's a small letter like this. At the very bottom it says, you know, something like your dear friend or your dear Mohandas Gandhi. It was from Gandhi, and it was this beautiful letter stuck under the desk in archives. For me, that was, again, and that was a remarkable moment that, you know, I mean, to find such a communication between these two extraordinary people in such a way. But again, it's an example of intangible, living heritage. Finding something like that reminds you of the connection between all of these extraordinary people, but also reminds us of Adyar's connection with the broader world. That Rabindranath Tagore spent time here in Blavatsky Bungalow. That Thich Nhat Hanh has come and spoken at the School of the Wisdom. That Samdong Rinpoche, the former Prime Minister of the Tibetan government in exile, who's a member of this society, would regularly come here. These are intangible connections. And so this is one of my other stories. The last story that I will share with you is, at that time in the 1980s, we were very fortunate to be living close by to Achyut Patwardhan, who was someone of great esteem. I think I'm saying his name right, Achyut Patwardhan. Yeah. There's a peepal tree planted by him. I'm not sure if it's the same one, but there's a peepal tree just out here on the 1987. There was a tree planting, but Achyut was again, for me, an intangible, living moment of my connection with the Theosophical Society and with Adyar, because Achyut was living here for the last few years of his life. He was born into a Theosophical family. Very briefly, he was one of Gandhi's main strategists and a remarkable, and he was a professor at the Hindu Benares University for many years. He was also the founder of the Socialist Party of India, and he also was the most remarkable educationalist. Absolutely, fundamentally about human regeneration, of what education can do. Well, here is an intangible connection between my life living in Adyar and becoming a scholar and a writer, and the things that Marja talked about in the introduction. Because we used to have tea once a week with Achyut, and we'd go for walks and we would discuss lots of things all the time. But one of the things about Achyut, one day he was talking about the fact that Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, had asked Achyut to be the first President of India at that time, because of his esteem, because of who he was, the work he was, and so on. And Achyut basically said, no, I don't want to become the first President of India. And he explained to us at the time why. And that really changed my life in terms of where I headed. Because he said, when he saw what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with the nuclear capacity for such extraordinary destruction of humankind, Achyut, in his very sharp intellectual fashion, said, and he was a politician from pretty much a very young age, close friend of Krishnamurti's, and even as a close friend with Krishnaji, Krishnaji said, you go off and you do your political work. I'm not going to stop you. They had different ideas about what could be done in different ways. But Achyut was a politician pretty much all his life until this happened. And he said, I knew that when these two bombs were dropped, if this is the end game of politics, that it can produce this outcome, I'm done being a politician. I'm walking away from that. And henceforth, he devoted his life to basically education, to the work of Krishnamurti and of the Theosophical Society. And he lived in Adyar in the 1980s until, in fact, until almost the end, he was living here. Yes, that's right, Jayashree, yeah. So, and we were very fortunate to be with him at that time. So, that story, I share that story with you because Adyar, for me, has the most remarkable significance in relation to these intangible connections. And we know that, as Theosophists, everything is about that interconnectedness, that capacity to take a journey with others, to respect others, that we are all together in this journey of seeking wisdom together. So I know that all of you have such stories. I want to finish off by just saying that Adyar is, in many ways, I see it as a very activated space, and a space that has potential into the future of activating so much more. It has the most precious environment. It has an extraordinary place in Chennai. And of course, it has always been under certain pressures from the city and from... When I was here in 1979, it was a very different place. There were very few cars, for one thing. We all know how significantly it has changed. But Adyar, I see, is a very activated place, and a place in which we can see the fullness of humanity, that real understanding of what it means to regenerate. Regenerating ourselves through the life here, what the life here gives us, but also to respect the life here in the environment through the ecology, because we are all kindred. There's in New Zealand, where I come from, in my tradition of being a Maori, which is a Polynesian people, we talk about becoming kin. All of us are kin. We are kin with the animals, we are kin with the sea, kin with the ocean, kin with the forest. And you feel that in Adyar. You walk down, yesterday we were walking behind a peacock just in front of us, and there was a mongoose just a little way ahead, looking very cheeky, and beyond that there were some people walking. That is Adyar. It is an extraordinary place, and with so much to offer in the future. So in closing, I think that Adyar has a very significant a very significant role in how it is a template for living together as a kind of activated ecological dynamic, thinking of relationships being the most important thing. We live in very precarious times. This is a very precarious time and perilous time around the planet. And I think it behoves us to recognise on Adyar Day, particularly, how fortunate we are, how privileged we are to be in such a space as this. And that there is so much more to do, so much more to understand, and so much more to give. So with that, I wish you well, and I know that you all have stories that are just the same as that, what I've shared with you this morning. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Baden, to bring to us this importance of living heritage. And we all live it through stories, which do speak then us very much. Thank you. Now we have next Dr. Geetha Jaikumar. And she was an associate professor of commerce in a women's college in Chennai. She also served as principal for a few years before retirement. She has been the editor of Wake Up India, a journal of the New Life for India movement for over 20 years. She is also the editor of Adyar newsletter, the quarterly journal which reports on the events of Adyar in the Adyar estate. Geetha currently works as a researcher in Adyar archives. And now she will tell us about Adyar shrines. So please.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Let me first thank our International Secretary, Marja Artamaa, for giving me an opportunity to make this brief presentation on the shrines of Adyar with material collected from the Adyar archives. But Marja has given me quite a challenging task, as there is so much to share about the shrines on our beautiful estate. Not just facts and figures, but as Baden mentioned, many fascinating stories which are so much a part of the history that is largely forgotten today. However, that has to wait for a more suitable time, and I will try to do the best I can with the time allotted to me. I would also like to thank Jayashree Kannan, officer in charge of the archives, who has helped me in collecting all this information. Without her help and support, this presentation would not have been possible. So thank you, Jayashree. The idea of having the various religions commemorated on the estate was the brainchild of Colonel Olcott, who suggested building what he called a pantheon of the religions, wherein all the faiths would be symbolically represented. He therefore placed in 4 niches in this hall the figures of Jesus Christ, Gautama Buddha, Sri Krishna and Zoroaster. He also put up a few symbols of other faiths, but it was in 1925, during the time when Jina Rajadasa was the vice president of the TS, that a complete makeover of the walls of the headquarters hall, as you see today, was done. He collected images and tracings from scholars and religious heads of each faith. These tracings are all there in the archives, and put in new symbols of all the religions, both existing and extant. He also included a beautiful Arabic inscription concerning the Quran and employed a Muslim plasterer to place the inscription. You see it there. I don't know how many of you are aware that the idea of starting the annual convention with the prayers of the religions originated in this very hall. CJ is Jina Rajadasa. He writes that during the time when he was busy with the work of supervising the workmen who were putting up the new symbols of all the religions in this hall, Dr. Besant and Mr. J. Krishnamurthy returned to Adyar from England. They came over to the Great Hall, where the scaffoldings were still up, looked around at the innovations that made the hall representative of the chief religions, and suddenly Krishnaji exclaimed, "Won't it be a good idea to begin each day of the convention with the prayers of all the religions?" This was on 25th November 1925. CJ immediately jumped into action, and though he had very little time, he managed to obtain from the various communities in India the necessary brief prayers and got the pamphlet ready in time for the 1925 convention. This pamphlet is used even today, and this ceremony of the prayers of the religions clearly reiterates the brotherhood that exists between the religions and the reverence of theosophists towards all of them. Dr. Besant, expanding on Colonel Olcott's idea, decided that small individual shrines, each dedicated to one religion, should be built on the estate. Land was provided for each shrine by the TS, and the adherents of each religion were invited to raise funds and erect such individual shrines, and thereafter maintain them for the use of the residents belonging to various religious denominations. Taking up her offer, the first two shrines to be built on the estate were the Hindu temple and the Buddhist shrine. The construction of these two shrines was completed by 1925, and therefore they were consecrated by Dr. Besant during the Golden Jubilee Convention of the TS. She also laid the foundation stone at this time for the Zoroastrian temple, a church and a mosque. Also for a Jewish temple, which however did not get built. The foundation stone for a Masonic temple was laid here as well, but very much earlier in 1909. As I have very little time, I can only give a brief description of the various shrines on the estate. Let me first begin with the Bharat Samaj temple, or the Temple of Light. This striking Hindu shrine with its finely sculptured dome, as you all know, is situated just off the Founders Avenue. Here at sunrise every morning, a beautiful Bharat Samaj puja is performed. The foundation stone was laid by Dr. Besant on 1st May 1921, and the temple was completed in 1925. At the request of Krishna ji, it was privately consecrated by Dr. Besant on 20th December 1925. Bishop Leadbeater, who had been given an English translation of the ritual, was, with his clairvoyant vision, able to give a description of what was happening at different stages of the puja. It was found that the most wonderful changes took place on the higher planes during the ritual, a vehicle being created to receive a magnificent downpouring of spiritual life and power. Later, he arranged for a pictorial representation of the thought form created by the ritual. The first ceremony of the Bharat Samaj temple took place on the morning of 21st December 1925, with J. Krishnamurti officiating as the priest. The novel feature of this temple is that there is no image whatsoever of any aspect of the deity, but only a burning lamp, for light is recognized by Hindus of all the various divisions of Hinduism as a symbol of God. At the Bharata Samaja, for the first time, the congregational worship was introduced as a collective way of invoking the Almighty's power and blessings. Let me show you some views of the temple. The sculpture is so elaborate and beautiful and so full of symbolism and meaning that it would require many hours to describe it. Since I don't have the time, I am showing you only a few slides of this and other shrines. On I think west face, you have Sri Krishna with his flute, the sacred cow Kamadhenu behind him and flanked by lions. You have here Brahma, his four heads facing the four quarters, seated on a lotus of immortality and flanked by swans, the Hamsa. Then here you have Dakshinamurti, seated under a banyan tree, dispelling doubts of his aged pupils by the teachings given in perfect silence. This is a view of the congregation at the first puja performed by Krishnaji. The second shrine that was consecrated during that memorable Golden Jubilee celebration was the Buddhist shrine. Situated in the coconut grove near the river, this shrine with its tank is one of Adyar's most beautiful sights. Colonel Olcott records in his diary that in 1883 he received a note from the Master KH expressing the wish that a Buddhist shrine should be erected. The note included a donation of 150 rupees and a plan of the sanctuary. However, the shrine actually got built many years later under the direction of Jina Rajadasa and was completed in 1925. And this too was consecrated by Dr. Besant during the 1925 Golden Jubilee Convention. Now, members at the consecration of the Buddhist shrine, and here you have Dr. Besant. On the other side, you have Leadbeater, and then behind you have Krishna ji. She is performing the consecration ceremony. The shrine contains a statue of the Lord Buddha given by Annie Besant that is dated between 8th to 10th century AD. The image represents the first sermon setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma delivered in the deer park at Sarnath near Benares. Hence you have the wheel and 2 deer here below the image. The mudra or the position of the hands is that of expounding the law, and round the head in Tibetan characters is a famous Pali verse which summarizes Buddhism. Of all the objects which proceed from a cause, the Tathagata has explained the cause, and he has explained their cessation also. This is the doctrine of the great Samana. Close by you had an old pagoda, Japanese pagoda bell, which used to be sounded at 6 o'clock both in the morning and evening to call to mind the 6 remembrances of the Lord Buddha. Unfortunately, the original bell was stolen many years ago, and the new bell which was installed has now been kept in the museum for safety. Opposite the shrine, across the lily pond, was a magnificent Bodhi tree which was grown from a sapling brought from Buddha Gaya, a descendant of the original tree under which the Lord Buddha is said to have attained enlightenment. This was obtained by Jinarajadasa with great difficulty, and how he obtained it is another story. And it was planted by him on 24 December 1950 in the presence of 2 yellow-robed Buddhist monks who had first given him the Panchasila in Ceylon. This place where the tree was planted was a favorite meditation place of Colonel Olcott, where he had built a seat with the pond in front and a wide view of the Adyar River. However, this tree toppled over late night on 1st July 2021 due to insects attacking the main trunk from inside. Another sapling has now been planted in its place. Then we come to the Zoroastrian temple built by the Parsi Theosophists. The figures on this temple are Assyrian in origin. The beautifully sculpted animal man figures on each side of the steps represents the self, the higher self, in the world of form. The kneeling horses, the kneeling horses at the top of the columns represents the mind obedient to the will of the self, and the winged figure over the entrance is an ancient Zoroastrian symbol of the highest self, its threefold nature being represented by the radiating wings and the tail. The ground for the Parsi fire temple was consecrated by Dr. Besant in 1925, and the work of erection was completed a couple of years later. Here we are. The Parsis, as you might be aware, worship the holy fire as a symbol of purity, righteousness and light given by Lord Zarathustra, founder of the Zoroastrian religion. Then we come to the, these are some pictures from the archives, Parsi members at the foundation stone ceremony. Here you have Dr. Besant and Leadbeater laying the foundation stone of the Zoroastrian temple in Adyar. Now we come to the church. Now the foundation stone of the Liberal Catholic Church was laid by Dr. Besant on 11th January 1926. Leadbeater writes, and you can just visualize this, that 2 imposing processions, one ecclesiastical and the other Masonic, were formed at Blavatsky Gardens, and they marched under the great banyan tree and through the groves of palm and casuarina trees to the site chosen for the future church. Dr. Besant laid the foundation stone. Here you can see Dr. Besant, you have Leadbeater here, and at the back you have Rukmini Devi, all in Masonic regalia. She laid the foundation stone, and Bishop Leadbeater then came forward as the presiding bishop and solemnly blessed the stone on behalf of the church, praying that much good work might be done and great blessing might radiate from it. But though the foundation stone was laid in 1925, it was only in 1937 that the chapel of the Liberal Catholic Church was completed and consecrated by Dr. Arundale. Then we come to the mosque. Dr. Besant also laid the foundation stone for a small mosque on the estate during the 1925 convention. Modelled on the famous Pearl Mosque of Delhi, it was completed in 1937. There is no image, as Islam worships directly the one eternal supreme Allah. The mosque is oriented towards the Mecca. The design was selected by Geetha Rajadasa, and on the facade of the mosque, over the central arch it says Allahu Akbar, God is great, and over the two arches on either side, as you can see, you have Wala Ghalib il Allah, God alone is victor. Now it is interesting to note here that while the foundation stone of the mosque was laid by a Christian, Dr. Besant, it was a Buddhist, Mr. Geetha Rajadasa, who selected the design, and the architect and contractor were Hindus, in addition of course to our Muslim brethren, and all of them worked together to raise funds to put up the shrine. It's a shining example of interfaith harmony and secularism. Now I was reminded of what happened in our little mosque when I read a news article a few days ago about a Hindu temple inaugurated by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji in Abu Dhabi. Here a Muslim ruler donated some 35.5 acres of land for the temple, and Parsis, Buddhists, Christians and of course Hindus all contributed their skills in building that temple. So maybe this is a sign of better things to come in this strife-torn world. The last shrine to be built on the TS estate was the Sikh temple or the Sikh temple or Gurdwara, whose foundation stone was laid by John Coates on 26 December 1977 and was completed the following year. In November 1978, the Tamil Nadu governor Mr. Prabhudas Patwari inaugurated the temple at a simple ceremony during which the Sikh flag was raised, verses from the Guru Granth Sahib were read and prasad was distributed. We also have a Masonic temple on the estate, for which the foundation stone was laid by Dr. Besant way back in 1909 on land generously given by Brother V.C. Seshachari. The temple that we see today was built by a prominent Freemason, one Mr. A. Schwartz, who was also the treasurer of the TS for many years and presented to the co-Masonic order. Apart from all the temples, here you have Dr. Besant blessing the foundation stone of the Masonic temple at Adyar. You can see the stone. I haven't had time to touch up the photographs. These are very old photographs and so a little blurred and faded. Apart from all these temples that I have detailed so far, we also have a couple of other temples. The oldest temple in Adyar is the Hanuman temple on the banks of the Adyar river. This is a very tiny temple built by Lakshmanan, Dr. Besant's servant, shortly after she became the president in 1907. He missed the devotional atmosphere of Benares, his native place, and longed for the temple bells and their constant call to the Devas. So he gained permission to build his little temple using his limited store of money. We also have an Amman temple, a small village temple near the main gate of the estate, about 200 yards from the bank of the Adyar river, with a very interesting history. But time doesn't permit me to dwell on this in detail. I will just mention that there was a malignant entity which inhabited a neem tree there, and this was exorcised by priests belonging to the Hindu, Christian and Buddhist faiths under the direction of Geetha Rajadasa and Leadbeater, who also were instrumental in eradicating the practice of animal sacrifice and help to purify the whole area. So, this is the and on the tree died, and on the base they have kept the idol of Ponni Amman. Just a minute. Here you have the Ganesha temple, which was constructed by Jina Rajadasa, and this temple touches the platform on which, in the middle of which the tree was, so that good influence will pour from here onto that and prevent that entity from again coming back and inhabiting the tree. If you go and look at that, you will see all these details. Now, these are the formal shrines designated as such on the estate. Apart from this, there are other shrines as well, but not necessarily designated as shrines, but shrines nonetheless. The entire Adyar estate is a shrine, for this is a hallowed place, a sacred land chosen by the masters themselves as being worthy to be the spiritual headquarters of the TS. They have appeared here in their physical bodies, trodden the paths, leaving behind traces of their invisible and indelible influence and magnetism. Our founders have lived here and striven to make Adyar a flaming center from which blessings may pour forth to various corners of the world. On the first floor of this building, where we are meeting today, is Dr. Annie Besant's room, itself a shrine, for there she lived and worked for many years for the welfare of humanity and all of life. On the banks of the Adyar river, we have the Garden of Remembrance, where the ashes of some of our greatest leaders are buried. Dr. Besant, Bishop Leadbeater, Dr. Arundale, Jina Rajadasa, and other former presidents. When we visit that place, we are also inspired by the work that they have done, and we too feel we must emulate them. After Colonel Olcott's passing in 1907, Dr. Besant arranged for a statue to be made by the same artist, one Mr. Govinda Pillai, who had been chosen by Colonel Olcott to make the statue of HPB. And on 7 December 1907, at a function to unveil the statue of Colonel Olcott, Dr. Besant said, and I quote just a small extract from that, "We have met here to unveil a statue to Colonel Olcott's memory, and that statue has been placed side by side with that of his great colleague, so that whenever we meet in this great hall, we may have before us the outer forms of the two who made the whole movement at the present time possible for us and the world. But not by a statue will Colonel Olcott's memory be preserved. We may say of Colonel Olcott, if we would seek his monument, look around at the headquarters that he built, that he watched over with fatherly care, that he loved, protected and improved. The whole of Adyar is a monument to Colonel Olcott, and we have placed a statue here not as his true monument, but as our loving tribute, rather to satisfy our own hearts than to add to his greatness and to his fame." I thought that was a beautiful speech. And I will conclude by quoting from an appeal that Colonel Olcott made, in writing, and then he read it to Dr. Besant. It is there in the archives. And he said, and this is when he was, when he lay dying, in the last days, "I desire that so long as there are sufficient funds to make it possible, you," that is Dr. Besant, "and the succeeding presidents residing at Adyar will see that the place is well cared for and properly kept up as the headquarters of the Theosophical Society. Do this in memory of dear HPB and myself." Thank you.
This special place, inviting us to go